Well, hi everybody. Sorry, a moment or two late here. Um, but we want to talk about focus, and I want to begin by asking the question. One, if you can hear me, chat something that says sounds good, it's working or something, or tell me where you're from. That'd be even cooler because people are from all around the world. But I want to talk about focus really quickly in terms of when is it bad to focus. A lot of times we think this is a given. I'm going to walk you through some ideas. We have a course on this, so it can be more involved, but it's some really basic things that should help you a lot on getting yourself to focus or your kids. But when might it be a bad thing to focus? I want to give you an example. So in hospitals like emergency rooms or emergency situations, they do something called triage, which is a way of prioritizing who you work on first and next. And I want you to imagine someone who's really, really quite focused. I mean, really focused. And someone comes in like with bleed from their neck or jugular bleeding or something serious like that, and this person is working on a sprained ankle. Well, the person gurgling and struggling to survive could be trying to get attention. And imagine someone with hyper focus saying, "I hear you. I know about your jugular, but I'm going to finish this first. And when I finish this ankle, I'll get to your problem. So you're just making this take longer." Well, in that context, obviously, you should set the ankle aside and run to the jugular, because that ability to interrupt ourselves is actually a very powerful, helpful thing. And so a lot of times we expect too much about focus, and I'll get back to that in a moment. But I want you to think with me about focus. See if I can get my camera to focus. That'll work. So when we homeschool and we have kids, and even growing up in life, I was a person who did not focus, not well at all. In fact, I make a joke commonly that I have not ADHD, but ADOS, attention deficit. Oh, squirrel, that kind of disorder. And it's been that way all my life. It's been intimately connected to procrastination. So what would look like procrastination was me not doing what I'm supposed to do, right? But I am doing other things. And this may be kind of your theory of chronic procrastination. I have no idea. But the truth is, that's part of the challenge. That I grew up in a world where I was constantly interested in this and that and this other thing and this thing, etc. This commonly goes with people who are kind of entrepreneurial or arts oriented. I'll talk about that in a little bit as well. But this orientation I remember I had a testing that kind of backed this up when I was, in my mid 30s. I remember talking to my mother, and she said, I was telling her about this. This sounded like me. She said, "Freddie, does it say anything in there about procrastination?" And I said, "Well, yeah, I guess, how you label it." She said, "You're the worst procrastinator I've ever seen in my whole life." My mother was the one that had a list for the week, did her list every day for the day, every week for the week. She always completed her lists. They didn't carry over in that regard. She was a list queen when she cooked. She laid all the ingredients out in the order they would occur, and and put them together and cook them. So that's the nature of the game. So I grew up around that, and she asked me about procrastination. I said, "Yeah, it does, but I'm going to do something rude, Mother." She said, "What's that?" I said, "I want you to compare me to your kids and your family members and your friends and their kids. Just compare me to all of them about what they've gotten done so far in life. What all have they done?" And she got quiet, and she said, "Well, you have done a lot." And then she wrote me a birthday card about a week later or so, and it said, "Dear Fred, if I'd known now, if I'd known back then what I know now, I wouldn't have been so frustrated at how hard you were to potty train." Kind of relationship we had. So, growing up, I had this constant issue of not being able to focus, and it created challenges for me in academics. But in the course of time, I was able to get my degree and a master's degree and a doctorate and all. So I learned things about focus the hard way. It's been a difficult, challenging game. So you may have a child like that, or you may be one of these people. And what I want to do is try in this moment to share with you some thoughts, some techniques, or really, the way I understand things is I like to have an understanding about things and then talk about techniques or approaches or processes, etc. Because if you think about it wrong, you're going to find that you're going to not be able to consistently act in a way that is going to be helpful. So what is the value of focus? I kind of dissed it at the beginning. Why is it so important? Right. It's important because it's how we get things done, because those bursts of concentrated action, right, allows some effect to happen. So if we stay focused and we write a sentence and then another sentence, in the course of time, we got a paragraph, page, pages, chapters, books. That's how it works. And if someone is constantly distracted, even in conversation with them, if you've had conversations with people before that are distracted, it's very difficult to understand what they're talking about, because it's like they're in constant free association. Yeah, I came in to talk to you because, well, my daughter, Susie spelled, it's really with two Z's. We did that because I had an aunt, Irma, and Irma always loved some flower, peony, or so. There's some flower with two Z's in it, and we thought we'd honor her. Because you know how flowers are, and oh my gosh, the flowers this spring have been so amazing in Texas. I've just watched them just burst out. It's just something. The purples, the Indian blankets, they're okay. Well, I shouldn't say Indian. I guess I should say Native American, because I don't know how that works. But Native American blankets, I don't want to insult anybody. And by the way, I have been crocheting lately, and I'm making a blanket for the baby for. And it's like, I don't know where any of this going or been or what's going on. And it's probably what's happening to some degree in their brain. So let's try to think about focus in a way that understands its value, because what you really want is the ability or skill, or you're going to build in your children, the ability or skill to focus when they need to. They don't have to focus all the time. But when they need to, you need them to focus. And you may be running into that challenge now with a homeschooler who doesn't get his work done. Often it's a he, maybe a she, doesn't get things done in a timely fashion, then comes up with excuses and complaints. And that generates a lot of challenges, because they aren't learning, because they aren't getting their work done. So results aren't happening. And I would say the first thing you want to understand in trying to overcome this issue with focus is simply that it's not the natural state of a human to focus. That's not natural. Now, what I mean by that is, well, have you ever had kids, little ones? You've been around little ones, been around toddlers? Their attention span is surprisingly short. We just saw one of the grandbabies. We have 8. 7 of them are in diapers. So we'll have 8 by October, and they'll all 7 be in diapers, 1 not. But I'm going to tell you, young children, none of them focus. So obviously there's a learning thing. Maybe it's brain development, etc. But there is a game in play on focus. And let me pause in my lack of focus to say, feel free to chat. If you have questions or something comes up about this topic or something else, put it in there. I'd love to interact and address the questions. So that's part of the live game, the way I understand it. But if we understand that people don't focus naturally and appreciate why, it makes it much easier. So in teaching kids to drive, I remember our whole process in teaching the children to drive. There were three of them who were more hyper-focused folks and two that were not. And the two that were not were much better drivers. They're much better. And you can see why. I mean, they had their other issues too, but they were easier to teach is what I'm trying to get at. And what we found is these individuals that were more interruptible would notice what was going on around them, so they could see traffic this way and that. Sometimes the focused people would just be so focused. I'm in this lane, I want to get in that lane. So they'd get over there as fast as they could. They didn't have an awareness of where they are. You've probably seen that with people in the grocery store. They're so focused on what they're doing, they bump into people, don't know where they are in, the time-space continuum. So that, I would argue, means it's a natural state. And as a natural state, it tells us part of the solution. This natural state also is a little worse in some people, and I think it's personality driven, as I mentioned before. So some people are lateral thinkers. Linear thinkers think. Traditionally in pop culture, they call that kind of left brain orientation. So you're thinking step, 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 thing, check off list. It's in a line. It's linear. Lateral thinkers, like me, tend to think in association and parallel, and this thing over here and that thing over there, and their brain is jumping. And that shows up good in debate. If you're debating five people, you can keep up with the debate and confuse everybody. It's also very good for creativity, because creativity is largely the combination of two ideas that have not been combined before. Reese's peanut butter cups or something. You got chocolate in my peanut butter. So when you see someone that's lateral, that can be artistic, can be entrepreneurial, can be creative, can be, I guess, neurochemically a problem, but understand that orientation is a talent. But here's the rub, and this is kind of I have three things I want you to remember, really. The first is this. We live in a world, and I taught it for many years, and I'm repenting. I told somebody this a few days ago, and they went, well, that's not what you've taught us all these years. And I go, true, because I'm still learning. So what in the world would it be? And it's about strengths. So the world says, and I bought it, serve to your strengths, lean to your strengths, use your talents. Now, that's not true. It's just that's not all that's true. So the idea is, don't spend time on your weaknesses, spend time on your strengths, because the strengths will override the weaknesses. But as I've thought about it and lived life a bit, the things that hold us back are our weaknesses. They're actually our weakness. They're actually the constraints in our life. So if you have something like you're not organized with time, or you don't have systems in place, or who knows what it is, you don't know how to cook or something, if it's relative to your job or whatever, it's a problem. It's a problem if you don't know Excel and you work in a business that needs to know Excel. The argument I want to throw out here for your kids is that actual weakness they have is not something to dismiss, but it's something, I would say, not even to just get it to where it's buttressed or not causing a big problem in your life, but rather it's really a strength. It's something you can take on and get to strength level. So we know this with things like reading. People that don't read well can go through classes and training, get to where they read well, right? Or writing can work that way. Or math. This is one of the things we think, oh, I'm weak in math, so we don't ever learn to overcome it. Instead of backing up, really learning the fundamentals so we can advance. We'll talk about math in the course of time. But it is incumbent on you as a mom or dad to help these things, if they're really hindering the child, that's a weakness, to let them work on it, because what I do know is humans can learn. It's an amazing thing. Get them to work on it to where it's a strength, and that's what we're talking about with focus. So when we look at something like focus, What we're concerned about, very simply, is them having the skill, the ability to bring their attention on something, to bring action on something, to produce a result, to advance the ball for their life. That's what it takes. And as a fellow ADHD, ADOS person, I can tell you it can be learned. It can be learned. And the way you learn something is to practice. If you'd like another example, just think about golf. The people that get really good at golf spend time working on the weak parts of their game, because the weak parts of their game are what slow them down the most. So it's just a human phenomenon that if we practice something enough, more than likely we're going to get better at it. There can be exceptions, but they're that. Normally what happens, the more you practice, the better you get. So I want to talk to you about exactly how to get your child or yourself to practice focus. All right. Now, I want to mention here that this is fundamentally about motivation. A lot of people would say it's about neurochemistry, and I don't want to deny that you can have neurochemical things go on. Everything's connected, mind-body connection, whatever. But, thinking that you were born with an Adderall or a, deficit is a little bit problematical. I'm not saying don't take the meds. Do what you want to do in life. Figure out with the doctors. I've been tempted to. I've had contexts where I've taken the meds or something similar to the meds, and it created a lot of terrific focus for me, but it also removed some other aspects of who I am or toned them down. So I said I really want to try to figure out how to do this naturally. I would argue even if you take medications, or your kids do, they still need to learn skills to improve, because they can improve, you can see, because you move from childhood to adulthood. You weren't focused as a child. Motivation. So this is part of the key, the whole nature of motivation. What I'm wanting you to know are three things. One is you focus on the weakness, and you want to work on it and practice to get it strong. Number two, we're going to talk about the principle concerning limits. And number three, we're going to talk about the nature of what I call coming back. So I'll get to those. In motivation, however, here's kind of the framework. So if you think of motivation as a delta, okay, so it's a big triangle. So in thinking about motivation as a delta, your child has four things going on, and you have four things going on when you're motivated or not motivated. And so whichever one is the problem, or two, you want to fix. So here's how the delta works if you're taking notes, okay? So on one side, I put it on the left, you want the word here, H-E-R-E, here. On the right, you want the word there. And on the bottom, you want the word deadline. And in the middle, you want path. So from your angle, it'd be here, there, deadline, and path. Those are the component parts of what goes on in motivation. So motivation is about there. That's kind of the vision thing. You want to be somewhere. You want something. You want some result. Here is where you are in real time. Like when you're on a trip, you want to go to Disneyland or Disney World, and you're in Iowa. So the here to there, that creates a kind of tension, a motivation in and of itself. But the deadline adds to it, because it lets you organize your actions in time. It's not exactly trying to motivate you, but if you have forever, you tend to take forever. So until you decide when to get a project or thing done by, right, you don't have a real way to organize everything. But you can have the here and the there, where you are in reality, where you're starting, where you want to get to. It could be finish the math book, and we're on chapter 2, right? So you may know those things, and you may have a deadline to do it by the end of the year, end of the semester, or something like that. But the path itself is crucial, because if people don't know what to do next and do next and do next, they have a hard time acting. They have that deer in the headlight thing. So what a curriculum does for you, like a math book, it lays out the path. Do this lesson and this lesson and this lesson. And they lay it out, and then we change the paths. You ever notice that? So we're going to change it into, well, we're going to skip the practice things. We're going to do this over here, and etc. So instead of following, doing every other problem, we did that. I did that in high school. I had us do every other problem. Don't know why. They just did. Too much work. So that's the game in motivation. So if you look at a child that's not motivated, I'm going to tell you they either don't know where you want them to get to, they don't know where they are, they don't have a deadline, or they don't have a path. They don't know how to do it. One of my favorite stories or examples was with one of our kids, who now is a professional writer, but in the early days, he would come in, fall down on the table in front of his other brother and sleep through writing. So I came in one day, finally he got tattled on. And I came in one day and he had written one sentence in 30 minutes. And normally they write 3 pages, double-spaced in 30 minutes, the way our system worked. So I sat there and looked at him and said, what's going on? And whatever, sleepy or can't think of what to write, blah, blah, blah. And I said, well, let me try it. And I sat down and I timed myself on how long does it take me to write 3 of these double-spaced pages. And it took me 4 or 5 minutes. I just wrote quickly. And I said, there's no reason that it takes you this long. So what we're going to do is set up a timer. So I added time to the issue. And that became crucial because when I added time, I did it like this, 7:40 a.m., page 1. So he had a deadline, page 1, I put it at the bottom, right? 7:40. So he starts at 7:30 and he's got 10 minutes to write that one page. On the next page, I put 7:50, and then on the third page, 8 o'clock a.m., right? So we had a deadline, and then we had a timer, and we said, go. From then on, the first time he did it, he was finished with the whole page in 15 minutes or less because of the power of that delta. So if you have a child that's not motivated, they either don't know where to go, a clear expectation of what's to be done, don't know where they are exactly, don't have a deadline, or don't have a path. I remember last story I'll tell, a young man who was staying with us. We were there was surgery or parents out of town or something, but he was for a week or two was homeschooling with us. Maybe all of their kids were. But he was not doing any math. He was just sitting there looking at it, not getting any done. And so I look at it and I'm going, what's going on? Well, how does this work? Well, you do the problem. I made him explain it to me. You do the problem. And then you do another problem, blah, blah. And I said, so where you got to get to finish this lesson? Over here? And he said, yeah. So it was like problem 18. And I said, what are you on now? He said, 6. I said, what are you on? He said, problem 6. I said, where do you have to go? 18. I said, so you got to go over here to 18, right? He said, yeah, I've got to finish 18. I said, where are you now? 6. Okay. So you're going to 18 and you're at 6, here, there. That's all I was doing. I said, what we need to do is see how many problems you can do in like 5 minutes. Let's try that. And so I set a timer, and he knew the path because it was right in front of him. Do 6, 7, 8. I did the timer, and suddenly within 5 minutes, he had done 3 or 4 problems. And I said, look, this says you can get this done this amount of time. And so we just kept the timer, gave him about 10 more minutes, see what he got done. 10 more minutes, see what he got done. It's magic. And it's doing it because it's generating focus with the human being. That's what's going on in the mind. So think about these 2 principles. This is all you really need to know. One is limits. So limits create focus. So when you have a time limit, a limited amount of resources, there's something called I remember Picasso's blue period. It wasn't that he was sad. He limited the palette. He limited what he painted with to shades of blue, essentially. You can do this with music. When I was taught this stuff, I wound up writing some songs. I'm not musical much at all. Barely can strum a guitar. But I made a limited number of chords, and I played with just like those 3 chords until I figured out a melody to go with the poem I'd written. So I wrote a song. Because limits create a certain kind of focus in the game. If you want to uh, work with your kids in trying to get them to make a choice. Limit the options to them. You don't say, where do you want to go eat or field trip or whatever else. You want to say, do you want A, B, or maybe C? Give them some options that focuses their attention on exactly what to do. If you ask them questions, if you limit what they're answering when when they're reading a book, you're trying to get them to share it. Something like, just tell me who are the people involved and what actions did they take and how did it change things from the beginning. So that kind of focus allows them that limit, generates a kind of focus in life. And so if you teach subjects in homeschooling and you limit the time, you literally are saying, we're going to work on math for this period of time. When it's over, it's over. That's your time, and there are a number of problems. And if you don't get completed, you're going to have to do them later in the day, in the afternoon. A lot of what homeschoolers that we've worked with will do is just let them work on it until they get it done. It drags out for hours and all kinds of stuff, instead of having a limit that generates focus. Number 2 principle is the thing I said about come back. So here's kind of the trick. Focus is not exactly ongoing concentration, because we can all be distracted. Some people do develop great powers of concentration, but I'm going to argue that's a little different than focus, because focus is still a matter of getting things done and pushing them ahead. So I would argue that just like driving a car, you get distracted and you look over there, but you come back and look at the road, right? And then something happens over there and you get distracted and look them up. Somebody in the back seat and you look back, right? You might have a thought. You go off in a thought for a second, then you come back conscious. That's the game. So when you're in a world in which distraction can be an advantage, openness to interruption can be an advantage, but it's creating a problem because you're not getting things done, then those micro moments of coming back and just keep learning, come back, and keep training your kid to come back and to come back and to come back. It's not about focus in a moment. It's about focus over a period of time. So even though you do this, you bring yourself back. And you probably experienced that. You say, no, what am I doing here? And you pull out a word or reminder. I'll say, focus, Fred, get this thing done next. That's the true nature of the game. So I went through a lot of things. It may have been scattered out, but essentially, I'm wanting you to think about working on their weakness to where it's stronger. They can learn to do this. It's going to come about by that here, there, deadline path. Do they have a plan? That's the path. Do they know where they are? Do they know where they're headed? And is there some kind of deadline to organize their time with? And then you want to simply make sure the right kind of limits are in play so they're focused properly. And lo and behold, you want them to just keep learning to come back, just to come back, just to come back. So those are my basic thoughts on focus. What about you? Any experience, any questions, anything I can clarify? I'm pretty sure this chat mechanism works. I'm streaming multiple places, but I think I've got the software that works. So if you have something you want to share, to chat, do that. Otherwise, I'll let you get back to whatever you need to focus on. Sometimes there's a delay in the system, and of course I'm in the process of getting this going, so I don't know if there are a dozen people. Someday I hope we'll have 1,000. It'll be awesome. But what I'm trying to do is, during this coronavirus game, I want to daily do this live conversation. Hope people find it helpful. It'll replay. We're going to turn it into a podcast, so these will be available to people in the future that don't know what we're trying to do in building independent individuals. But it's very much just an opportunity to serve and to cheer and to promote the cause we care about in terms of independent learners, teaching kids to learn how to learn. So, hope you found that helpful, and we'll see you tomorrow.